All right, thank you. Please remember to mute your computers and your audio devices so we don't get the feedback. Good morning, we're about to resume. We heard a very challenging speech from Dr. Gardner, and now we're going to hear from our colleagues who have been in the trenches working on some of the initiatives that we have been focusing on for our transfer students. The first panel is going to be titled Reimagining Course Redesign for DWIF. The moderators for this will be Dr. Olena Jadko, the Director for Online Education, and Mr. Donald Sutherland, who is the Manager for the Office of Assessment and Education Effectiveness. To ensure an organized question and answer session, if you would like to ask a question at the end of the panel presentation, please use the hand raising feature. Or if you prefer that we ask a question for you, please use the chat feature and message Elena directly. In-person guests, please come to the mic and wait to be called on. As a reminder, please unmute your microphone when your name is called to ask a question. If possible, please turn on the video component and please state your name and affiliation.
Thank you, Dr. Brown. So we are about to get started. So welcome everyone, and this is our first session. I'm really excited to see so many participants with us. We have over 100 participants with us online, so we are indeed trying out our high flex model. So thank you all for your active participation and your presence. So as noted, our first session is titled Reimagining Course Redesign for Student Success. In this session, we're joined by a panel of faculty on my left and on my right who have participated in these two major initiatives designed to make teaching and learning online more effective and engaging to our Lehman students. They will share some of the innovative approaches to teaching and to redesign of their online and hybrid courses they've embarked on with the goal of promoting student success. So I will introduce our panelists in just a second. And before we begin, I'd like to ask Donald Sutherland from the Office of Assessment and Institutional Effectiveness to provide some context to the Course Redesign Initiative. Thank you, Donald.
Thank you very much, Elena. Student success has a long history at Lehman College, but more recently in 2016, the college had set a goal of awarding 90,000 degrees, certificates, and credentials by 2030. This goal became the defining challenge for the college, the 90 by 30 challenge. In order to achieve that goal, the college needed to double the number of degrees, certificates, and credentials that had been expected based on its enrollment, retention, and graduation rates at the time. That goal was enabled and was tied to the mission of the college so that the college would be able to help transform the Bronx, which is currently one of the most socioeconomically challenged regions in the country. To meet this goal, Lehman College would need to combine its passion and commitment for serving students well with broad-based and scalable improvement. The Course Redesign Initiative is one of these improvement initiatives that was undertaken by the college. Based on a review of a course grade analysis prepared by the Office of Institutional Research, and it seems that Dr. Gardner gave more homework to the office, bottleneck courses were identified. These courses are defined by large student enrollment and high DWIF rates. High DWIF rates are a barrier to timely student advancement and graduation. They consume student financial aid, and they discourage students from pursuing majors of interest or majors that are in demand by graduate schools and also by the labor market. In fall 2019, Provost Wasu initiated and funded a course redesign challenge. Faculty developed and submitted proposals to the Office of Online Education, and the Committee of Faculty reviewed these proposals. Ultimately, 10 proposals were accepted for funding. The redesigned courses were run during fall 2020, but due to the COVID-19 pandemic, 7 of those 10 courses were run. The courses demonstrated promising results in reduced DWIF rates. Among those courses that showed a lot of promise and progress were Biology 173 and Philosophy 171. Two of today's panelists to my right, Aneska Singh from the Biological Sciences Department, and Julie Mabey from the Philosophy Department and Chair of the Philosophy Department, will share their experiences and insights today.
Great, thank you so much, Donald. So we also have Kim and Jacob from Health Sciences, and I would like to introduce this other initiative. Many of you might have heard of the National Association of System Heads and Association of College and University Educators, AQ. So Lehman College was one of the 5 CUNY colleges selected to participate in this outstanding opportunity to partake in the faculty development, the national initiative. And part of that program was almost a 10 months long online course, online experience for our faculty to engage in active learning about effective practices to enhance their courses. The 5 areas that this particular faculty development program focused on was designing an effective course, establishing a productive learning environment, using active learning strategies, promoting higher order thinking, and assessing. So that, again, coming back to the word of assessment, to inform instruction and to promote student learning. So out of the 60 faculty that have started, we actually had the highest number among other colleges who've also participated. We had 30 faculty who've successfully finished, and 2 of our faculty are present at this panel today. So without further ado, I would like to get us started and to get us to our panelists. So the first question that I will ask is, I'm asking everyone on the panel to please introduce yourself, note which program, meaning initiative you were part of. Tell us a little bit about the course that you were designing or redesigning or re-examining in light of that experience. So I'm going to go ahead and start with Jake. If you could get us started, please.
Hello, my name is Dr. Jake Eubank. I'm the director of 2 undergraduate programs in the Department of Health Sciences. One is Recreation Education, and the other one is Therapeutic Recreation. I attended and participated in the ACUE course, the 10-month course, and mainly because we have a course within our program that required a little bit of more of a redesign because of the nature of the course, which is Rec 210, which is Recreation Leadership, which requires a great deal of public speaking and presentations within the classroom. So we had to find alternative ways to accomplish that goal. Thank you.
Thank you. And Kim?
Hi, my name is Hyungmi Kim. I'm assistant professor and graduate program director in Recreation Education and Therapy program. I have taught several undergraduate courses, both the recreation and therapeutic recreation program. And I also have taught several graduate courses in recreation therapy and research method. So I took AQ program for about 10 months from fall 2020 to spring 2021. I think I have a complete 25 module course in effective online teaching practice and learn many different pedagogical approach that make better online experience for students. So based on what I have learned, I re-examined my course, 2 courses, History and Philosophy of Recreation and Introduction to Therapeutic Recreation, and I redesigned them. So they have a combination of synchronous and asynchronous session, and I'm here to share my experience. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm going to go to Julie, please.
Hi, my name is Julie Mabey. I'm the chair of the philosophy department and currently the director of the disability studies minor here at Lehman College. I was involved in the course redesign initiative. We redesigned, I had a faculty member who worked with me, Jose Muniz, and we redesigned the Philosophy 171 Problems of Philosophy course, which is basically the introduction to philosophy in the department, the general introduction course. We have other specialty courses on ethics or topics within philosophy. And in some ways, it's the most challenging course because it is on so many different themes and topics. And we designed the course following a style of teaching that was developed for teaching physics called the investigative science learning environment, which involves teaching physics through active learning and activities and experiments rather than through lectures. So students learn by doing and not by reading or listening.
Thank you, Julie. And next, we're going to go to Agnieszka, please.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. My name is Anushka Singh, and I am an adjunct professor and substitute lecturer here at the biology department. During my time here, I've taught a number of courses: human bio, introduction to bio, anatomy and physiology, and microbiology. During this time, which was 7 years of teaching, I have created a method, I've developed a method that I've used throughout these courses. The main goal of this method is to increase students' retention, engagement, and experience. So students are participating in group learning, presentations, discussions, games, and exams. And through the discussions and the answers, I'll dive in deeper more about how that happened. Thank you.
Great. Thank you all for your introductions, and we'll dive into our first question. So what are the biggest challenges you face in designing an online or a hybrid course, or a combination of the two, so that students feel engaged and can do their best? So I'm gonna address that to Jake.
Thank you. Yes, there's a lot of challenges that we face, particularly because of the nature of a lot of our courses in recreation education and therapeutic recreation, which require a great deal of group work, hands-on activities, and like I said, public speaking assignments. Although there's no lab experience within these courses, many of these courses are designed as face-to-face classes, which created particular challenges in light of our recent situation. So many things were challenging, exploring new ways to engage students in the virtual setting, and learning the different strategies of using polls and chat tools to engage students, assigning students to read slides during lectures, and really teaching the students how to engage online was one of the challenges that we faced, because they were so used to being in the face-to-face format. New classroom strategies were also difficult to come up with, using in-class written assignments, recording lectures for students to watch on their own, and so that the class session can be more focused on reviewing past content, discussing new content they're going to be exploring, and managing those online synchronous class sessions. There's a lot of things that are going on during those online synchronous class sessions where we're lecturing, we're having discussions, we're watching students to raise their hands, watching the chat, sharing the right screen, particularly when you're using 2 screens to manage everything. Coming up with new homework strategies for those assignments. We using frequent quizzes, tests, discussion board posts, and requiring them to respond to each other's posts, and exploring those new tools that we have, such as VoiceThread, have been of particular, particularly helpful throughout this process. One of the other challenges was organizing the Blackboard site so that students can easily follow along and they don't get lost within that site. and maintaining that consistency throughout the semester. And teaching online definitely requires more work than a traditional face-to-face course. You have to grade more material, engage students through multiple means, and maintain that same academic rigor that we try to maintain during our face-to-face session. So those were some of the challenges that I experienced.
Thank you for sharing. Julie, did you want to comment?
Oh, sure, thanks. Yes, we had a lot of the same challenges because the course when we redesigned the course, as I mentioned, it's designed around this idea of doing teaching through observations and experiments, and figuring out how to teach abstract philosophical concepts through observation and experiments was a challenge. In the online environment, we ended up, for example, creating new videos. I have a friend who's a sort of amateur video maker, and so he created videos for us to try to give students something to observe online and then ask them to think about it. And also, one of the things that I focus on is accessibility. So all those videos had to be captioned and everything. So it was quite a challenge.
Anyone else on the panel would like to comment on the challenges?
So one of the challenges that I mainly encountered was the engagement portion of the class, which is how to monitor students when they're not online through video chat. They turn their cameras off. And so many times students are doing something in addition to learning at that moment. So I had to find ways to remind them that participation was a very big deal for the course. From time to time, I had to stop and learn how to refocus the entire course or students to talk about things that they were more comfortable. So a lot of times, instead of talking about the actual chapter review, I focused on, let's say, a current event that was happening in the world at the moment, which then lowered their ability to not participate, and they decided to, now let's talk about topics that are more interesting. This helped the students to engage more, to trust each other in conversation, and to have a voice, which I found to be very effective. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And that actually leads us to our next question. So in the class that you teach, how do you promote more interaction among students, and how do you create a sense of shared classroom space and community? And I'd like to ask him to please comment.
Sorry. One of the biggest challenges we face, actually, since the pandemic, all the courses actually moved to online course. So many students actually lost the connection with their peer. So to increase the students' sense of community, I established peer-to-peer support in my online course in a few different ways. First, in the first day of the class, I usually offer synchronous session. In the session, every 2 students are assigned for a virtual group, like study buddy, for group project. I have a group project in my introduction to therapeutic recreation course to research a specific population with disability. For example, individuals with spinal column injury, individuals with depression, individual with schizophrenia. So they pick up one of the population based on their interests. So they present the population in class in the middle of the semester. So they work together for the group project, but the study buddy is also the main point of contact throughout this semester. If a student have any question anything about the course, they can ask, they can actually text each other. And if they want to talk about other assignment, they can chat and help each other because they're study buddy. They, of course, they can also reach out to me, but before they reach out to me, they feel more comfortable to reach out their peer to discuss. Second, I also form a small group with 5 to 6 students to participate in group discussion in my asynchronous session. Before I redesign the course, all students just to participate in discussion with using one discussion board. But I was concerned if they read every post, because honestly, there are too many posts. Even though I request the student response, 2 posts of their classmate, I didn't feel they are really actively, interact. So I decide, redesign the discussion board. Now they have only 5 and 6 students in each discussion board, and they post and reply to other posts within the group. Surprisingly, they actively interact in a small group and they help each other in the discussion group. For example, if a student misses a requirement in discussion, other student actually, just jump in, hey, you missed, the requirement, why don't you add? They really help each other. So this is a really great thing after, I resigned the discussion board. Lastly, I use my office hour with not only one individual student, but also a small group of students. Probably you have many students in your online class, so they miss the assignment or they a little bit behind. So at that time, I reach out to student and schedule individual meeting and then share their personal experience, why they couldn't complete the assignment, why they couldn't, participate in discussion. And then they probably share their personal things, some difficulties, they struggling something. Then if the student permit, I invite other actually member of their small group. So virtually, actually, they interact in my office hour through the Zoom and they help each other, and then before, redesign this course, I have a few students just suddenly disappear, during this semester. But after I redesign the course and then establish peer-to-peer support, actually so far, I have no student disappear. So it was a really, good thing and extremely important in online class. So this is really intent for students to be able to stay connected and help them establish to peer-to-peer support system. So it was pretty successful in my course.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing. And I think that pertains to the earlier remarks during the keynote about peer mentoring and how that could have a positive impact. Julie, did you want to comment on this question as well?
Oh, sure. It's a really important question for our approach because the IEL approach is based on a group learning strategy. So small group discussions that do the experiments or engage in the observations and then discuss what they observed and what they get out of those observations or experiments. And doing that in the online space is particularly difficult because when students are in the breakout rooms, you're completely cut off from them, unlike in the classroom. So one of the things we did was we started using Google Slides. In the classroom, we used whiteboards. So we switched to using Google Slides online as the kind of whiteboard, which also allowed me to monitor what the different groups are doing when I'm not there, because I can see what question they've answered and what they're writing. And then I can pop into their breakout room and I can, begin commenting or asking them to explain more on the slide or asking them about why they answered this way or that way, or so it was really helpful for the group learning environment.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing that, Julie. So our next question is really very specific about a learning activity. So if you could tell us about a particular learning activity that you had to reinvent for the online delivery and the steps you had to take to make sure it was effective online. So I'm going to see if Aneshka, would you like to get us started? Thank you.
Hi, everyone. So going back to my method, as I mentioned, it's an amalgamation of teaching and learning styles. So students are assessed in 3 different ways. The first category is a pre and post critical thinking exam, which is an exam that they take on the first day and the last day of class. The second category is a weekly presentations and exams, and that's worth about 55%. The students are broken into groups. They're completing weekly tasks and presenting them based on the chapters. And then after every 4th chapter, they're taking an exam. And lastly, they're assessed on a scientific project. And this is a project that they must complete throughout the entire semester, which begins right in the beginning of the semester. So students are asked to basically talk more about themselves. This project is a self-evaluation project. And this goes back to the bigger question: why are you taking this science course? How does this science course apply to the major that you are currently in? And so students are participating in weekly questions, which I then give them feedback. And so they're preparing for a presentation at the end of the semester. Depending on the amount of students that I have, whether it's 30 students or 90 and above, students are broken down into, students are given this individual consultation with me throughout the time, which I find helps them become more comfortable and confident about this project. This project was designed in person and then transferred online. Now, when it was transferred online, students must do 3 things within this project. They have to add a scientific information that tells us about who they are and where they're going as far as their career, and how do you want to present this in an artistic form. And so at the end of the semester, each students are given 3 to 5 minutes to present this project. And overall, the only difference that I've seen that was really difficult with this transition is the students did not want to be as creative as they were in person. Students resorted to just turning on their computer, their camera, and speaking out loud about just reading what they wanted to talk about. Some other cases, students resorted to PowerPoints or documentaries that just gave us a video to just look at rather than them speaking. But in person, I've had lots of creativity. So if I had a student who was into a social work, and the reason this student wanted to become a social worker is because they've experienced, let's say, violence, and they wanted to work with students in high school. They then told us about that, and they were creative to present that. They may have, put on some artistic form that allows us to see how comfortable they are about this career choice. And so when transitioning online, I lost that creativity, which is something that I'm still working around and how to increase that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Anyone else on the panel would like to comment on the question about a particular learning activity? If not, we'll move on to our next question. So if you had to give students one piece of advice about being successful in an online class, what would it be and why? So here we're looking at the student perspective. And I know that many of you have had to transition to online teaching. Some of you have taught online prior to the pandemic. So again, if you had to give students one piece of advice about being successful, Neshka, would you like to keep going? Thank you.
So one piece of advice that I would give to students is to be open-minded. This new way of learning is a transition for all of us, teachers, administrators, schools, everyone. So just to be patient and open-minded to this new way of learning. Even as I mentioned in my courses, we're taught that this time period is an evolutionary period, right? We are transitioning into a totally new way of life. So that requires a lot more patience. It requires open-mindedness and just the strength and ability to keep going forward. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for that. Jake?
Yes, I would absolutely echo patience and open-mindedness and understanding that your instructors are not masters at with the online platform in which they're teaching from, and they are also learning along the same ways. And my other piece of advice would be the opposite, for instructors not to just assume that students know what Blackboard is, know what VoiceThread is, know what Flipgrid is, understand what a portfolio, an e-portfolio is, or blogs. So, you know, I think it's a little bit of empathy on both sides, but my main piece of advice would be to understand how your instructor organizes their Blackboard site. You know, I don't see the same instructor that utilizes the same type of strategies or organization as another. So, you know, understanding how that Blackboard site is organized and the different tools and strategies that they use as far as how assignments are going to be completed, how they're going to be graded, and even learning a little bit about how some of those tools work, such as VoiceThread. I have come to really rely a great deal on the use of VoiceThread for my own lectures and for students to record videos of themselves presenting. And some students have a little bit of trouble with how VoiceThread works, but once they learn how it works, they really, really like it. And so utilizing those resources, you know, within Blackboard, within those tutorials, or even, you know, contacting IT help desk or anything like that to really learn how it works before trying to submit that late assignment last minute and understanding that you don't know how it works at all. So that's one piece of advice I would give.
Great, thank you so much. Anyone else on the panel in terms of advice to students? Julie?
I'd just say, don't be afraid to make mistakes, right? Just speak out. If you're wrong, it doesn't matter. You're halfway there because at least you're thinking about this stuff, and that's what we want. So just be there, be out there.
Great, thank you. And that refers to being present, right? So when we are in our classes, if it's a physical classroom where they are present, we have that eye contact that we have right now, you know, in person. Online, it's a little bit different, right? So we do have to be creative, as been pointed out, in terms of how we approach these types of assignments and what new strategies we can be utilizing. So our next question is, if you taught online before the pandemic, tell us how the pandemic changed the online class experience for both instructor and students. Were there any positive lessons to be learned going forward? Julie?
So I taught, before the pandemic, I taught asynchronous online and hybrid online for a number of years, both styles. And the biggest shift during the pandemic was the inclusion of synchronous online learning, which none of us did before. We either did in person or we did asynchronous online. Nobody thought to do synchronous online. So that was the biggest development. And so that was a challenge, trying to figure that out and get students engaged. That was something we never did before, even those of us who had taught online. The other thing for me was that, now I had a lot of students in my class who didn't choose to take an online course. Before the pandemic, not all students liked online courses, and many students didn't choose them. And those who did choose to take the online course, even if it was their first one and maybe they decided they didn't like it, but at least they gave it a shot because they realized it was their choice. But now we had all these students, I did anyway, all these students who would never have thought to take an online course ever. And so there was a real challenge in having to be more sensitive to the needs of those students who were not prepared to take online courses technologically or academically, weren't interested in at bottom online interactions and courses. And so that reaching out to students and reaching students in that environment became a much bigger challenge for me.
Thank you for sharing, Julie. Anishka?
So as I mentioned, this course previous to the pandemic, we're already working with lots of online programs. They had to create PowerPoints. And so that transition to online was actually not a big difference. However, with the pandemic, I did notice communication being a very big issue. If assignments were asked to be done, I had to find a number of ways to make sure they kept having reminders. So I would create announcements, I would mention it over and over during class, especially during class, in the beginning of class and the end of class, always reminding students to what they have to do for the course. And so I think going back to your point, you have to become a lot more sensitive to the different types of learners. You have some that did not want to do online learning, right? And so they have to learn how to use Blackboard. So that meant that we had to navigate them through this process. So sharing our screen, showing them how to use Blackboard, where to access the recordings, and so on and so forth. Yes, thank you.
Great, thank you for sharing that. And the second part of that question was, are there any positive lessons learned to be going forward? Anyone on my right would like to comment?
I guess I'll comment on that. Well, I actually taught face-to-face, but I was still teaching web enhanced. And so students were still taking quizzes, they're still watching videos and submitting their assignments online. And one thing I learned is, and to agree with the previous answer, is constant contact is extremely important. And I learned that sending out, a weekly update to my students about upcoming dates and upcoming due dates. I know we say it in the syllabus, and so it's set in stone, and that's where they should go to get that information. But with the online format and that kind of distance education, it does require constant reminders and constant updates about what to expect and how things are going to happen for the next week, and upcoming, like I said, upcoming due dates and upcoming other reminders, upcoming conferences, and just making sure that you are giving your students full information repetitively, at least once a week, and engaging them as much as you can. That was one of the things that I learned from becoming fully online.
Thank you for pointing that out. And I think it's something that goes without saying in the in-person interaction. We can make that announcement, we could just, point, to something on the board and remind something, versus in the online space would have to be a little bit more intentional about all of that communication. So that leads us to the last question that we have. And what I'd like to ask you about is, what was the single most useful thing you learned that helped you improve teaching and learning in your course? And the changes that you've made in the course that you've redesigned by partaking in this initiative, do you think you might be making these changes in the other courses that you teach? Kim?
There are many useful things I have learned from AQ, but if I need to choose, the single most useful thing, it would be that I redesigned the grading system of low-stake assignments such as quiz. When I only teach in-person course before the pandemic, I didn't provide a quiz because I can check student understanding in classroom. However, in the online class, in particular in asynchronous session, it's very difficult to check if the student understand the content. And so I use a quiz as more like formative assessment to check student understanding. So quiz too are excellent resource for keeping students on track and increasing, their learning. However, as you know, many students very, very stressful about the quiz and very, very sensitive about the grade of the quiz. So I thought if it is just an assessment to check student understanding as a low stake assessment, it is motivating for students if I allow them to retake the quiz multiple times. If they fail some question, it is still okay because they can go back to read the chapter or listen to lecture video or review the PowerPoint. And so they have a more chance to digest the content and retake the quiz. So I feel like as a result, a student can get satisfied score in the quiz, and it also help increase student learning. And I also believe it also can impact student achievement. So I think student more confidence in my course and more motivate to complete other high stake assignment well. So I think we don't need to be too strict to low stake assignment in terms of grading. And this small achievement from low stake assignment can lead the student to make big achievement from high stake assignment. Thank
Great.
you.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Jake, would you like to comment?
Absolutely. One thing, if I had to choose one, I would say your colleagues and other individuals are your biggest resource. There's a lot of things that I really didn't know about, or teaching strategies that I really didn't think about. And one of the things in the ACOE course was that we assign most of our students, we have to go on a discussion board post and share strategies that we try, and some didn't work, and respond to each other. And so that course required some interaction among some of us, which then provided me with better ideas and better way of doing things. And that continued outside of that course. I'm constantly talking to colleagues here at Lehman and those connections I have throughout the country about different ways that they teach and different strategies that they've used, and how this pandemic has forced them to change some of the way they do things, and it really is enlightening. So your colleagues are your biggest resource in this.
Thank you for pointing that out, right? So those conversations, they take place during the professional development sessions, but also certainly can continue beyond that. Julie?
For me, the biggest thing that I learned from the IEL approach that we adopted for teaching philosophy was that I should focus not on what I will do to teach, but on what my students will do to learn. And that's from Eugenia Etkina, who was kind of my mentor on this redesign, our mentor, I should say. And so so for us, what we did was we deliberately made every assignment an opportunity for students to learn. And so, we developed rubrics that capture how philosophers think. And then we use those rubrics as quick ways to grade assignments. And that allowed us to, as you did, Kim, to allow students to submit multiple attempts and without overburdening the grading, because what you care about is what they're learning and not what you're doing. And so that for me, and it's a lesson I've taken into all of my classes now.
Thank you for sharing, Julie. Anishka?
Yeah, so I think one of the most useful thing I've learned is the relationship that you can have with your students. And that's building trust. They should feel that they can trust you enough to take in the information that you're giving them. And so through the group learning, students and the discussions and the presentations and the projects, students are lowering this wall that they have when they first enter the course. And as they get to know me and I get to know them, and they're participating through lots of back and forths and discussions, they're now more susceptible to the information. And that to me helps me shift my teaching and learning styles every semester. Thank you.
Great. Well, that brings us to the end of our panel session. And I'd like to thank everyone. We do have a few minutes for Q&A. So if you have any questions here in person, we have a couple of mics at the bottom of the stairs for you to ask a question. And for those of you who are joining us remotely, we'd like to ask you to join to ask your question in the chat. And I will look at that right now. Meanwhile, I'd like to thank everyone for sharing very specific strategies and for sharing your story and journey and everything that you have done for the students. I think it's could be rather uncomfortable for us to try new things, try new technology, and technology doesn't work every time. It doesn't work perfectly every time, though we do hope that it does. And it certainly takes us outside of our comfort zone to try something new, to experiment, to innovate. But we would not have learned all of these new things if it wasn't for the need to support our students and their success. So let me see if we have any questions in person here. I don't see any. Yes, I see a question from Dr. Gardner. Thank you, Dr. Brown.
My question is one in retrospect about your experience, how you got into this. I know the college is going to continue engaging in faculty in this initiative. Is there anything that the college could do next time in a call for participation that you think might, I don't know, encourage more participation or permit it to faculty to stay longer with it? You know, some of them didn't finish. Did they have the notion they had to do everything in order to complete? I mean, my question really then is, what could the college learn from this to get even more faculty involved in the future and to sustain their involvement? Thank you.
Anyone on the panel?
So I'd like to answer that. I think it's the idea that we can do more within these courses. Having online teaching actually gives us more opportunity to use our time wisely, which is something that we, when we're getting into lectures, we can really take up 2.5 hours very quickly and not really get through a lot of material. But with this approach now, being able to shift our teaching styles can benefit us in ways that can trickle down to other teachers as well. I think that the departments can understand that if you can guide students structure your course enough to guide them and constantly keep in communication with them, build that trust, you can actually get them to accomplish retention, engagement, and experience. Thank you.
Yes, please, Jake.
Yeah, I think obviously resources definitely go into it, but something like this, having people who have engaged in this type of experience and program speak to its benefits. I think that's a great advantage that you would have, is to use the alumni from those programs. I think also increase the amount of resources that instructors have for consultations with those who have advanced knowledge in online teaching platforms. You know, although we go through these programs, and I've gone through multiple ones, I have a great deal learned. And if I had someone who I could contact and schedule a 2-hour meeting with, that would be great to have. And I know we have one person here at the college that we're able to contact, but I'm sure he's quite busy. And so if we had additional resources in that way, I think would be very helpful.
Thank you so much for these comments, and thank you all for your active engagement. There are no questions. I'm sorry, Kim, did you want to comment? Thank you. Thank you.
Personally, I think university also need to carefully listen to faculty voice. University is really great to listen to student voice because they are struggling during pandemic. However, you know, faculty are also human being. We are in the same situation. We are struggling. We are so, you know, need to adjust the new environment. We also adjust, and then we need to also take care about the baby, you know, everything actually, we are actually the same. However, I feel like it's a lack of communication source. So I would like to just communicate with somebody. I'm struggling something. I only listen to my student voice. However, I couldn't speak out, you know, what I'm struggling, what I need, especially this transition from, you know, in person to online, and everyone is very, very isolated, lost some connection.
Thank you for pointing that out. I think that's a great comment. And in our chat, all of our panelists are able to see that as well. There are no questions, but there are some great comments, you know, thanking all of the panelists for the great examples on terms of how to personalize learning in a remote class, focus on what students need to learn rather on what I need to teach. Thank you, Julie, for that quote. And thanking Aneshka for the great point on trust that needs to be formed with students. So again, thank you all of you for this terrific panel and for sharing your expertise, for your experience, for enabling Dawn and me to facilitate this panel and to engage with you. We do hope that we'll have this opportunity in the future. It's a very humbling experience to hear the stories, the specific examples, the details about how we have gone through this pandemic and made it through with the idea of supporting our students and making sure that they are successful. So thank you all. I'm going to pass it on to Dr. Brown.
Sorry. Thank you to our two facilitators, Dr. Jadko and Donald. And thank you to our panelists for your presentation, your thoughtful answers to the question of what you're doing to move student success here at Lehman College forward. So another round of applause to our panelists and facilitators, please.